Hi, everyone. Pastor Galen, lead pastor at Shine Hills Church. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. We hope that these podcasts will be a real encouragement to you on your spiritual journey. You can also connect with Shine Hills at shinehills.org. Hope you enjoy the program.
We are across the street and around the world. Shine Hills.
Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. And Nathan, welcome. Glad
Good
you're
to
back.
see you.
Yeah, this has been here we are, midsummer stride, right after Independence Day. How was your Independence Day?
I absolutely loved it. We got to watch not only fireworks, but God's fireworks, lightning on the 4th of July. It was beautiful.
Well, you must have been in a different state because we need that lightning and thunder here. But
Right.
And finally got a little bit of shower last night, so that was huge. So I'm really happy about that. But so we do something here. It's kind of, I don't know. We prepare for Christmas in July, so we call it our Christmas in July.
I like it.
And this gal comes in and she cooks this huge spread. And turkey and fixins. I mean, it's everything. It's just so.
That sounds good right now.
Yeah, well, so if I nod off and fall asleep, it's not because you're boring. I guarantee it's because the turkey hit me.
Tryptophan.
There it
I
is.
got you.
That's
Yeah.
So, and even Casey over here, he was in the same meeting. So
Boy, if he nods off and falls on the keyboard, there'll be Z's on the bottom of YouTube, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that may happen, but one of the things we did so we dream about what Christmas can look like. Mm-hmm. And what ideas and how we're going to package Christmas, if you want to call it that, and maybe the series that we're going to do a series leading up to it or a series following it, or we discuss all those things. And so, but one of the themes that came up in our what we call room one, and that's just complete brainstorming. Mm-hmm. In other words, if you have an idea, you say it. It doesn't matter. We're not going to even fix it. You say, we should take everybody to a trip to Florida. Like, you can say anything you want in room one, all right?
Yeah, okay.
And no one can say, well, that costs a lot of money. You can't do that, all right? So you just dream about it. So, one of the concepts that came out was, and I thought it was interesting. I'm not sure if we're going to go this direction or not, but it was interesting. And the word is deconstruction.
Oh, yes.
It's kind of I don't know if it's a buzzword, if you would call it that, but it's a word that's kind of common in our society.
Right.
I think I know what deconstruction is, but when I heard other people defining deconstructionism, it had it was going a lot of different directions.
Right.
Because you can deconstruct scripture, you can deconstruct history, you can deconstruct mathematics. Right. There's a lot of different ways that people have used this. So I'm just going to throw that word out to you. When I throw this at you, deconstruction, what comes to your mind?
Well, I really appreciate the question, and I'll tell you where I've heard of it, and actually maybe some of the origin of it. And I can't tell you that I am the master of all things in this, but I did hear a wonderful interview last year of a gentleman who had written a book entitled "The Devil and Karl Marx," and he actually goes deep into the life of Karl Marx. And when he says the devil and Karl Marx was quite literally a man who. He just hated people. Oh, yeah. He sang in praise of it. He wrote a poem in praise of the devil. Oh, so really? We're not speaking in some sort of hyperbole, and that's what he was trying to articulate
right out
in this
there.
book.
I didn't know that.
Genuine, very, very forthright.
Wow.
But one of the things that when it comes to the word deconstruction, and this is the context in which I've heard that, is Karl Marx had made a statement that really what he wanted to propose is a critique of all things that exist.
Okay.
And so when we talk about deconstruction, really that is kind of the philosophical theory that undergirds that critical approach to the world. And when we say critical approach, that actually is something that many people might recognize because there's been plenty of conversation regarding critical law theory and then its related field, critical race theory. But it's the idea of criticizing. So when we talk about criticizing, oftentimes what we would be talking about is looking into someone's life if they give opportunity for us to do this, and in a loving way reaching in and saying, we'd like to help you understand maybe where things went wrong so that we can restore you.
Okay, right.
What a Marxist believes in that reaching in and critiquing or being critical is actually to deconstruct, to destroy, because they want to destroy the world as it is and make it into a new communal ideal, essentially a collectivist state that is utopia.
Right.
And so, and they
So
even
it
talk
really
about utopianism.
yeah, no, that helps me a lot actually, because I've heard this before, that before you have this communism, everything in common, this utopia that you have to deconstruct or just basically disintegrate, like institutions,
Right.
and truth and the Bible and the church. I mean, imagine all those things are things that nationalism. We got to get rid of you got to deconstruct nationalism in order to have this global utopia. Am I on the right track here?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And so that concept, when you look at it, what they then will do, and we've maybe talked about this, it's been a couple of years now, but we'll talk about the fact that all of this is based on a dialectical model. That's a fancy word, forgive me for that, but I'll explain what the dialectic is.
Hegel.
And George William Frederick Hegel, absolutely.
He's still awake.
I
The
like
turkey
it.
hasn't hit him yet.
Well, yeah. Well, the gravy will soon. I'm
The
sure.
gravy.
No, so what we're talking about with Hegel and Marx is the idea is this: that there is a thesis or an idea that by its very nature will form an antithesis, and the two will wind up clashing.
Okay.
And what comes out of that struggle is a synthesis. But then the struggle continues because that synthesis becomes a new thesis.
Right.
So we have this cycle that they claim. And so what they want to do, though, is actually perpetuate that cycle. And that's the reason why you'll watch a Marxist that will do everything they can to set sex against sex, rich against poor, race against race, all those things, because they want to accelerate that dialectical cycle. And so to do that, many times you'll find a country like the United States of America, where actually it is the most glorious thing as far as a country goes that we've seen in human history. So what they have to do in that situation, and this is a fella, and I forget how to pronounce his last name. His first name is Jacques. The last name is Derrida. I forget how to say that, but he takes that, and we have to deconstruct then. Even what is good, you have to deconstruct it and break it down. And that's where in a country today, there was a poll done just in the last month or so, where there are fewer people now saying that they are extremely proud of America.
Yeah.
And so it's because there have been clear deconstructionists at work in this country.
So this Dorito fellow, you said.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was his end goal? Why does Dorito want to deconstruct?
The end goal for all of them is some sort of utopian society.
Okay, that's-
some
they
sort of collectivist or this commune, this feeling of a global commune.
Because it's not fair that one person has more than another person.
Right.
Is that correct?
That would be fair,
basically-
yeah. So, and that's where when we talk about equality and equity, the difference in that. And so what we believe, what an American would believe, is that we all ought to work off of the same level playing field.
Right.
But the
Equal
outcomes may
opportunity.
be different. Right.
Yeah.
Not equal
opportunity.
outcomes.
Right.
And that's where a collectivist, a socialist, will say, no, there should be equal outcomes.
That is the thing that I think through our time of discussing this, I've realized this is really what people see as fairness. Fairness is everybody is equal on the other side. And it's just, it's impossible to have people don't have equal intellect. They don't have equal abilities or skills. They just like, you have to, if you had a playing field or a team, some kids are going to be faster than others. You can't, you go tell your fast kids, okay, you got to slow down. So the slowest kid doesn't feel left out. Right. It's like, well, he's not going to run anymore because he's used to running this fast. And so this whole idea, it goes completely against nature, but it's how there's a lot of people in this world that think like this.
That's right.
And unfortunately, in my opinion, there's a lot of people that think like this that have a lot of money and a lot of influence.
Right.
And they're getting some traction in in schools and in our education and deconstructing of history, quite frankly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a great danger in that you can see in government policy.
Yeah.
And that would be, and it can happen in a lot of other venues, but in government policy, clearly. So if government does its natural job of providing for the rule of law and making sure that everyone has an equal playing field, that is a good thing. But if government is going to mandate equal outcomes, government becomes coercive.
Yep.
And so that's really, we watch that over and over again, where people that set off with these ideals to find a communal state or a collectivist or socialist state. And in every one of those, we wind up watching the government become very coercive and dictatorial. Yeah. And it's because it's built into the basis of their system, and it's very dangerous.
Right. So here's we just got off the 4th of July, and I did some quotes. I quoted you a few times. I don't know if, it was, there was some
the bottom of the barrel.
No, the heavy hitters I quoted was David Barton and Nathan Winters. Now, and I put you guys in that same category, quite frankly. But David Barton, and I said this, and I want to make sure I'm right. Does he live in Dallas?
He lives just outside of it in a town called Aledo, Texas, but it's in the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Does he have a ministry there?
Yeah.
I mean, his headquarters is there.
Yeah, Wall Builders is based out of
Wall
there, but
Builders,
also there's a museum with tons of early American memorabilia. It's a wonderful collection.
You need to spend several hours if you're interested in that. So I'm going to go to Dallas here at the first part of August.
Yeah.
But I'd really like to see that, and if you could give me a little pass, I would love to meet him. I know you know him really well. But I so appreciate him, because he is the antithesis of deconstruction. He's the guy going back to the Constitution, to our founders, and saying, no, this is what they said. This is why they said it.
Right.
But when you were talking about, let me know if this is a result of deconstructionism, or is this just a result of the house of cards falling in? I'm not sure. In the Declaration of Independence, it's in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth a separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So these guys basically said, okay, so everything's in shambles. Now, I'm not sure if there was deconstructionists that make that, there was taxation without representation that made that happen. But my point is, it seemed like the founders were reconstructing. Is that a fair thing to say about, because they said, listen, and when everything craters in, it's even given us an opportunity. Listen, if it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve a political bands which have connected them with another, to assume among the powers of the earth a separation and equal station to which the laws of nature and the nature's God entitle them. Mm-hmm. In other words, if this one is being burnt to the ground, this is saying you may want to reassemble. Is that right?
You've hit it spot on. And so here's specifically what was being overturned, at least in the American colonies at the time. And this is what they were expressing. So, of course, they were freer than most people on the planet in their day. I mean, they were, because the rights of Englishmen, let me tell you the rights of Englishmen. You can go all the way back into Anglo-Saxon history, and you can look at the relationship between the king like Alfred and Ethelred, and then his Wittengamot, which was an early version of kind of a parliament. Okay. So there was some understanding that the king did not have absolute control over everything. He had other nobles that he had to rely on. Now, sadly, there still were serfs. They had no freedoms. You get to 1066 in the Magna Carta, and what you have there are the nobles again demanding, and at essentially the point of a sword on Runnymede Meadows, demanding of King John that he understand that they have certain rights, and those rights are actually divinely given. Okay. And so that Magna Carta, the Great Charter, is so important in English history, and no other culture really has something like that. Okay. You get forward, you move forward into the mid-1500s, and you have the English Petition of Right, Sir Edward Coke. The following century in 1689, and this is what our founders were appealing to, was the English Bill of Rights. Okay. And so this was after the English Civil War. And they had already suffered through one king, Charles II, who almost returned them back to a divine right of kings that had been set up under James I, a very uncomfortable. Charles I, James I's son, had actually disbanded Parliament. And so finally they had an opportunity to say, listen, we need to guarantee from now and forever a certain understanding of rights that Englishmen have toward freedom.
Okay.
And so what our founding fathers were appealing to was the fact that those rights had been violated by not just King George III, really by Parliament.
Okay.
And so they were reconstructing rights that already existed.
Okay.
And so you're spot on. I'm giving
So
some of the
there-
nerd behind it.
No, that's great because they did experience and taste that freedom.
yes.
Oh, and then they were that was taken away.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to get back to that 16. What did you? What year?
1689.
1689.
English Bill of Rights.
Now, okay, just help me out. Where does that Scrooby England? Where does Scrooby England? 16 something.
No, so yes, you're right, but that was more in the 16, 18, 19, 20, 21 era.
Earlier.
But
Way
it was
earlier. Okay,
it stemmed from the same place.
Yeah.
Because James I was king of England, Charles I would follow, and they were demanding that there was a divine right of kings.
Okay.
And so they were insisting that everyone go to the church, that they were the nominal leader of
Right.
the Anglican church. And so it was the same thing, the same idea that drove
Exactly.
them to come.
Well, and that's what drove our founding fathers underground to read that Bible. That's
right.
where they got that freedom from. Is like when they read Scripture themselves.
That's right.
And they said, "Well, we've got to go find a place where we can read and practice this." What God gave us, these freedoms.
Right.
And so they finally landed in the New World. And so there we go. But that's interesting that our founding fathers have that history, and they knew what happens when you take away, when you dictate to preachers what they can preach, which is what the king was doing at that time, or trying to.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And or when the king can dictate taxes and everything else, they were saying this cannot happen. So they were reconstructing something back to a freedom that at least they knew of or had heard of.
Exactly.
Right.
Right.
From their fathers.
And that
probably.
really, in many ways, makes them unique
Yeah.
in world history.
Yeah.
And I was talking about this last week down across the street from Colorado State University to a large crowd, but on that very subject, on the difference between a republic and a democracy and why it matters. But in that, when you look at what we have inherited in this country, much of that it really could not have happened in any other circumstance. But when you understand the spiritual undergirdment, if you will, if that's a word, that our founding fathers had, and then the understanding that came through the long history of England, and that's why we cannot be totally unfair with a James the third, not James the third, George the third.
Yeah.
George probably thought that he was still undergirding those rights and all those other things, but clearly what could be seen by the founders was that if you continue down the path that has been laid out by Parliament, those rights will disappear, and they've been hard fought for.
Right. Well, and when they put that in the very first paragraph, it says, so if all this folds again, you have the right to reconstruct, if you want to call it that, a new kind of government. And so I just thought that was interesting in the light of in our world today. It's like, I don't know if people really know that that's in our Declaration.
So when we talk about the difference between a reconstructionist, I like that word. If we've invented it just now, you can pay us later. But I like that. The reconstructionist versus the deconstructionist approach of the Marxist.
Yeah.
And we have watched that on a multitude of fronts. We've watched that within the church world, really since the 1870s. We see that with the rise of modernism, and actually it was Marxism that had crept into a number of German seminaries back then. We have watched this over and over through the decades, that deconstructionist idea that you can't believe the Bible, you have to hold the Bible up through the lens of modern ideas.
Right.
And so they really try to deconstruct the Bible.
Right.
And then we watch it just creep across society. And really, a lot of times, it starts at the spiritual level. And that's what you face.
Well, that's what we see, and I think that's what we as preachers are spending our time trying to reconstruct or to hold up truth in our day. And I will tell you, truth in our day, to hold it up, has a different impact than it did I think even 25 years ago, because some of the issues we're dealing with, the truth is causing a vitriol reaction that maybe it wouldn't have 25 years ago.
Right.
As, some of the Roe v. Wade would be an example. Same-sex attraction would be one other. Transgender, all those things. Those things are all, you hold up truth of God's word in our society today. It has a different kind of impact than it did even 25 years ago.
That's right.
And so it takes, we say to be strong and courageous. I think it takes a lot of courage to hold up those things. I want to take a little bit of a twist here because I was thinking about, so this is where my mind was going when we were talking about this deconstruction idea of institutions, of the Bible, of even America and some of the history and some of those things. But I got to thinking, and I'm not sure if this is a good example, but it's a interesting similarity, okay? And so Jesus did some of this when it comes to, he deconstructed and reconstructed almost in two sentences.
Wow.
All right, so take a look at this. You have heard it said that of old that is, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother is liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. Whoever says you fool will be liable to hell of fire. And then he goes on a little bit. And he says, you've heard it said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except for the grounds of sexual immorality, commits adultery. Here's one more. You've heard it said that an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil, but if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to the other as well. So, and he goes on. There's several examples of this, loving your enemies, all these things. But he's almost deconstructing the old thought, but he's replacing it with something better.
Right,
Okay?
exactly.
So today, this is my whole point. It seems like today we are deconstructing thoughts, but we're replacing it with something that is not better. They're replacing it. I don't know if they're replacing it with anything. They just want to destruct it.
That's exactly.
Does that sound right?
That's exactly right. And that is the clear difference between a Christian approach and a atheistic secular approach.
Yeah, just destruct it and leave it
Right.
in ashes.
Well, there's also another illustration of that. The difference between God appealing to you through your conscience and then just the feeling of guilt that the devil will bring.
Okay.
So when we talk about this, God always brings something to you to help strengthen you, to make you better, or to correct you, to bring you to a place where you will find peace and rest. Whereas Satan oftentimes will bring you a sense of guilt. He'll try to deconstruct you with no hope of actually ever being reconstructed better, but to leave you as a quivering pile of rags
and
on the roadside.
and hopefully, he comes to seek, kill, and destroy, and he hopes that you can destroy yourself. That'd be even a plus.
Well,
but you're spot on that idea.
Something I thought about when we were talking about that earlier was as when they go to deconstruct thing, it feels less like they're trying to like take it apart. Like our children's director was talking about her young boy who takes apart his RC cars to see how they works, and he can't put them back together again.
Yeah.
But the idea of taking something apart just to take it apart seems like you're not trying to understand it. You're just trying to reduce it.
Yeah.
It's reductionary, it always comes across to me when I hear the final argument that they bring out of it. It feels reductionary rather than deconstructing it to try to understand it better and then saying, see how this doesn't work. It feels like we're just like, I'm just going to take this apart into pieces that I can then attack by themselves without context. And,
Right.
and that's what it feels
That's a really good point. That's a really good, because I think a lot of times we can definitely, the things we do need to be evaluated. We don't do everything perfectly. I mean, we need to evaluate what we do and say, you know what, that part of it, that needs to be reworked. And I can see that, but these true deconstructionists, and Marx was it sounds like he was one of the ultimate.
So someone once wrote that Marxist philosophy is actually oxymoronic, but really, if there is a philosophy that undergirds Marxism, it is that idea found in the ruthless critique of all that exists.
Yeah.
And by critique, what they mean is the destruction the deconstruction of the world around them.
Right.
To try to build a utopia, which can't exist. Therefore, you're left in this nihilistic state of just hopelessness.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, so I don't know, to put a bow on this, I didn't know if you had a final thought you're scrambling to find there, but I think it's really an important, I don't know if this is where we're going to go with Christmas or not, but we want to reconstruct the idea of hope, to reconstruct the idea of purpose. And I think I think we got to continue to fight for the strength and the courage and the hope and the purpose and that our life here before God matters. And so we as pastors are continuing to try to uphold these things, and you're doing the same thing in our society, trying to uphold God's truths in the midst of people that not everybody agrees, right? And to try to speak this truth and speaking it in love. Those are Jesus was the master. I've just discovered, not just, but I discover every Sunday, I think, it's like, I want to thread the needle so perfectly. And it's like, I can only do so much, but the Lord himself is the only one that can hit this so perfectly. Right. And, he hit it perfectly, and he still died for it. So
amen.
They took him to the cross. They didn't want him around anymore. So. All right. So thank you so much for joining today, and thank you for being there today. And I hope that, like always, that you will be and remain strong and very courageous. God bless you all.